everyone. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to use the healing tools in Adobe Lightroom. So first, make sure that you have the 4 images so that you can practice along with me. You should be able to find these images in Teams. Download them, unzip the folder, and add them into a new album in Lightroom called Healing Tools Practice. Now you're actually going to find the healing tools on the toolbar under what's called the Remove panel. You're going to see a little eraser tool there. And within the Remove panel, you're going to have 3 different tools. We've got Remove, Heal, and Clone. Now all of these do different things, so I'm going to give you a quick overview on what each of them do, and then you're going to use whichever tools are best to remove the subjects from each of these photos. And when I say subjects, I mean all 3 birds, both of the horses, the glass, the egg, along with its shadow, as well as the man that's sitting along the brick wall. So let's go ahead and get started of just reviewing what each of these do. I'm going to start with the clone tool. Now the clone tool is exactly what it says it does. It takes basically a copy from part of the image and replicates it somewhere else in your targeted area. All of these tools work with a brush. So basically what we want to do, we can adjust the size of the brush here, and you usually want the size to be around, whatever you're trying to select. The feathering is going to adjust the edges of the brush, how soft the brush is. 0 is going to be the softest brush, or the least amount of soft brush. You can kind of see that here in the double concentric circles. The higher it is, the more feathering you're going to get, which is more of a softer brush. The opacity is how transparent your healing is. So usually you want your opacity at 100 unless you want the healing to be less visible. You could lower the opacity. Okay, I'm going to keep the feathering at maybe half, and then the size around the size of the bird. So let me make that a little bit bigger. Okay, and I'm going to do each bird separately here just to give you an idea of what each of these 3 tools do. So let's start with the clone. So I'm going to go ahead and paint over it, and what you're seeing here is the part I painted is the targeted area, and the other area is the borrowed area, the area that Lightroom thinks is similar to what you want to copy, and it's taking that information and placing it here. And you can see that that's not the best because we want to keep the wire intact. So I can take the borrowed area and do my best to make the targeted area look as realistic as possible. Now that actually looks pretty good, and you can kind of see though that the color has changed a little bit, because remember, we're copying directly from one part of an image and pasting it to another, so it's going to copy everything, the color, the shape, the texture, and sometimes the colors aren't going to match, like you can see here. Now our next one is the healing, which works very similar to clone, except for it's not taking an exact copy from the borrowed area and putting it on the target. It's going to take the information from your borrowed area, such as texture and shape, but it's actually going to maintain the color from your targeted area, and it should help to actually blend things a little bit better. But the idea is the same when it comes to size, feathering, and opacity. So I'm going to leave that there, and I'm going to go ahead and paint over this bird here. And you can kind of see what it's done already. It does kind of the same thing where here's my targeted area, here's the area that it's borrowing from, and I'm going to again do kind of the same idea here and make sure things line up. And you can see here that I didn't quite get everything I wanted. There's still a little bit of the bird there, so I could delete just by hitting the delete key, and I could go ahead and do that again. Now notice it's pulling from a different area this time, so I'm just going to take where I want the borrowed area to be. Now, if you're still seeing a little bit left here, I'm going to delete. Maybe we want to reduce the feathering. Paint a larger area, and you might get a better result. So sometimes just how much you paint and how much feathering you have can affect the outcome. All right, but notice here the difference between the clone and the heal. It's not a huge difference, but you're getting a lot better color matching with the heal option. All right, and then we've got remove. Now, remove has a lot to it depending on what you have access to. I have the options of the generative AI as well as object aware, but I'm going to show you what it does just basically without turning either of those on. So the idea is the same, where you can change the size and opacity, and you're still going to paint over the area that you want to change. But this time, I don't really have control of how it's going to replace that information or fix that area. You can see it did a quick analyzing of that area and then tried to fix it. And I can do a little bit of like moving this around. It can reanalyze and try to fix it. And you can see it's doing a pretty good job, but there's no source point to change from like they did from the other two. Now, I'm going to go ahead and delete that just to show you what the other two. So if you have these options here, let's do object aware and go ahead and do the same idea. And it should just let you better to refine things. So notice that it's giving you a refinement option where you can select more or less. So you're basically getting a better selection when switching that toggle on. So I could subtract from the areas I don't want to fix. I could add areas that I missed and apply when I'm ready. And you can see I think that did a better job than without the object aware selected. Now I'm going to delete that and show you what it looks like to do the generative AI by itself. Now you may or may not have this option, but basically the AI is going to go ahead and you have the same refinement options here. I'm going to go ahead and apply. It's going to take the whole image in and try to replace that information, and it does do really good jobs on more complicated areas. This is not a complicated image, but does a really great job. And you actually have multiple options down here. There's different variations. Now, this image is very simple, so it's not giving me a lot of different options, but it will on more complicated ones. You can also refresh if you're not liking the 3 original options that it gave you. Okay, last one here. We can actually use both generative AI and object aware at the same time, which will make your selections even more precise and hopefully give you the best outcome. And this again is a best for things with busy backgrounds, large areas you're trying to remove. Probably not necessary on this little bird with a simple background. And in this case, it actually did a worse job. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that, and I'm going to use just the regular object aware to get rid of the bird. Okay. Now I'm going to go to the other images, and without doing a lot of explaining, I'm just going to go ahead and remove the subjects. In this case, we want to remove both horses, and you can use whatever tools you want as long as within this assignment you use each tool. Use remove, heal, and clone at least once within these 4 images. Now this is a really complicated area through the fence, so I think maybe using the object aware and maybe even the generative AI if it's available to you, and using the remove option might be the best bet. Because we've got a fence in front of the subject, that could be very challenging to remove. So let's go ahead and let it generate. Refinement, we can see that it missed some of the legs down here, so I'm going to add that back in. And I'm going to subtract areas of the fence that shouldn't get removed. And let's go ahead and apply. If you don't have these options, you can still use the remove option and see how it does. You have the option down here to toggle the show overlay hover so you can see what it looks like without the little box popping up, and that did a really great job. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing with this one here, less complicated. Go ahead and apply. Okay, and notice what it's doing. So remember, generative AI is going to fill that area, and it decided that I should have a bird there. So remember, you have options. There's one without a bird, and actually 2 different grass options, and I could even refresh for more options, but I feel like that one looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my next image, and as I go to the next image, the settings should save. So this time I'm going to use a different option. Let's go ahead and try the heal. This might not be the best, but let's see. I'm going to make this size bigger. I'm going to go ahead and paint over the area I want to get rid of and see how it does. And that actually looks great. The only thing we don't want is we don't want the shadow. So I'm going to go ahead and make one more selection here. And that one is not as great. So let me see if I can make it better. Not bad. I feel like this little area right there can get fixed. Okay, great. Remember you can use the tool multiple times within the same image. You can even use all three tools within one image. Okay, I'm going to go to the last one here, which is probably the most complicated image. I bet the remove tool would do a great job, but let's see what happens if I use like the clone tool. So I'm going to go ahead and do the best selection I can here. And remember the source point, that doesn't look right, but what if I were to take the information here? Now that actually doesn't look too bad. I'm trying to line up the brick wall, some of the city, but you can see because the clone tool takes exactly the same information and moves it somewhere else that the sky doesn't really match up. So we could change the tool to like the heal. And you see it blurred a little bit better, but it's still not perfect. So maybe I can go ahead and heal that area. Okay, keep in mind it's taking from a weird spot here, so maybe I can move it around. Now, I don't think that looks great. We could probably do some work there, but you know what? I'm thinking remove might do better. So you're just going to have to go through and figure out what tool is going to be best for the job. Again, making sure that you use at least each tool once. So this time I'm going to go ahead and use the remove. I'm going to go ahead and put on my toggle options and select my subject. Let's see what Lightroom does for us here. That looks great. Okay, it did a really good job. It gave me a brand new background. Keep in mind we have some options here, some variations. I think that this one looks the most realistic. And we're done. Our subjects are removed. We've used all the tools at least once. That's how you use healing tools in Lightroom.